saw a truck hit this man, and the driver just came out and picked up the man and threw him in the garbage dump.
Well, can you back up again?
Yeah.
What happened?
We used to play on the street.
Patintero, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And so we'd go sometimes all the way from the Pitan, the block, you know,
Yes.
the whole. And so we knew everyone who lived in that street. But the end of that street we didn't go into because it was a main thoroughfare, and there were trucks and Japanese motor stuff that would go up and down there. And they hit a man, took him out from under, and just threw him in the garbage.
Was this a Japanese truck or Filipino?
Japanese soldier.
Oh,
Yeah.
Japanese. Okay.
But things like that would happen. We didn't know what was really, you know, and then when the first bombings started, September
44.
44, we were playing near the corner, and there were these two little kids who would kind of hang around all of us. Maybe altogether there would be about 15 kids who'd play on the street. We all had fun. And all of a sudden there were airplanes. And all of a sudden there was shooting. And we ran home from the corner. And Frankie and I, my older brother and I, ran home. And we thought, oh my God, where did those airplanes come from? And where did that shooting come from? And we thought, those are Americans. And so that's a different kind of sound. And then we went back, and when it was all finished, we ran back because we knew we had these two kids who lived in an apartment not far from there, and they were dead.
Oh my God. The two kids.
The shrapnels or bullets got them. They were both dead brothers. And then that same evening, the Japanese came in a great big truck and took 9 men out of an apartment house. There was an apartment house where 9 men lived. Well, they seemed like they were older than students who would have gone to Santo Tomas before. But then again, they could be men just getting together from families in the provinces. We didn't know them, but they were kind of stuck to themselves. And one day the Japanese came, took all of them away, and never saw them again.
Now, when did you leave that place?
After that, there was another house where people were taken.
Okay.
Then Albert, my Uncle Albert, opened the window 5 o'clock in the morning, got up and said, "Papa, Papa," calling out to the camp, as though he saw my grandpa in the campgrounds, which you could probably see if you really wanted to. And the spy was right on the street.
Oh, okay.
And Albert called to the man and said, "You have your day." So I told him to get down, shut the window. I went to my grandmother and told her what happened. And that same day we looked for a buggy, anything we could ride on to get out of there. And so they put a lot of times when I was kind of afraid.
Outside you had...
They'd mask me with
Right.
mud.
Mm-hmm.
They just put mud all over me.
Mm-hmm.
And bandana.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So my hair was long,
Mm-hmm.
blonde. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so the man who owned this but car.
Mm-hmm.
Not car, it was a charcoal-fed vehicle.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Said we'll meet at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Mm.
And he came at 4 o'clock in the morning with 2 guys with him.
Mm-hmm.
And these people knew exactly when the sentries were going to be at different areas.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd go slow, and tried to pass those places when the guards were not
Mm-hmm.
watching. And at one place we were stopped, but full of kids, and they were more interested in the vehicle
Mm-hmm.
than us, so we got through.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always kind of pushed down.
Mm-hmm.
And
So did they
younger
let?
ones-
So did they get the vehicle, or did they let you through?
No, we were able to get through.
Mm-hmm.
We went all the way to Baliwag.
Mm-hmm. And then when was the time when you walked? You were walking
After that,
in Baliwag,
yeah,
on the way to where?
to Pampanga.
Mm-hmm.
See, in Baliwag, we were on the main road.
Mm-hmm. Why did you go to Baliwag?
That was after the shooting,
Right.
after September.
Mm-hmm.
We left around November.
Why Baliwag? What, did you have
Because
family?
My mother's sister, Christina,
Mm-hmm.
was married to a Tiongson,
Mm-hmm.
whose relatives were all from Baliwag.
Mm-hmm.
That was the Rustia Tiongson clan.
Mm-hmm.
They were well known because
Mm-hmm.
one of them was the governor
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
of the whole
Mm-hmm.
Bulacan
Mm-hmm.
area. And so we were given an old house,
Mm-hmm.
a beautiful old house
Mm-hmm.
that was being used as a museum
In Baliwag.
in Baliwag
Mm-hmm.
on the main road.
Mm-hmm.
The people who owned it, the Magnos,
Mm-hmm.
had built a modern house, and they moved to the modern house. So the old house was just where they kept their old furniture and old dishes and
Mhm.
stuff like that.
Mhm.
It was a showcase. And they were spiritists,
Mm-hmm.
so they had a chapel way back in the woods. And we stayed, they told us we could use that house.
Mm-hmm.
So we had the whole house.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my brother and I got very curious about spiritists,
Mm-hmm.
because we had all kinds of gossip about what spiritists were about. So we'd hang about there until they'd tell us to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing that happened there was I started playing the piano, and some teenagers in the area
Mm-hmm.
discovered me, and they asked me to come and play for them.
Mm-hmm.
So they'd bring out old sheet music, and I became their pianist.
Mm-hmm.
I was 11, nearly 12. Yeah, 11. And it would start dancing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very curious about, boys and girls getting together. My first introduction.
Mm-hmm.
I was just peeking and watching them dance. That was a lot of fun.
So how long were you in that house?
We were there until I think it was the day after Christmas.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And some men knocked at the back door. And And I opened the back door. It was 4 o'clock in the morning, wondering who could be there. And the men said the Japanese are on the highway. They're burning houses.
So na.
Come with us immediately. Just take everything. I mean, all come with me.
Were these the guerrillas?
We suspected they were. I mean, we could, at that point, we could tell who were guerrillas and who were not. No spy would infiltrate that area.
Right.
And so I woke up everybody and got up and we ran, my grandmother, my mother, followed by all the kids. And I was the very last, making sure everyone was out. And I picked up a bottle of water. And we ran, followed this man through the forest. It was a pretty big forest. And we came out to a clearing. And then in that clearing near the Bukid was already several families already congregating to leave Baliwag. So we were assigned, and the governor was there.
Oh, was there?
Yeah, he was. My uncle's brother was already there, and they were kind of partitioning who would go here, who would go there, and we were assigned to go with a group that would go to Barrio Labak.
Which is where?
In Pampanga.
Pampanga.
Because that's where they had land. And most of these people from Baliwag had land somewhere. And they were going to go straight to
the
those
Bukids,
places.
yes.
So we walked in the rice fields. You know, and then men started appearing.
Who?
Men. We knew they were guerrillas.
Oh, okay.
And they would have bolos with them. And some of them carried my sister, the one who had polio, and the one who had asthma. I mean, they took turns carrying and guiding the older one, and we went through rice paddies, and we walked all day. And we would, that bottle of water I brought was the only water available. So that got distributed with the kids who were needing water. And then there was a dog fight. And we knew the Americans were.
Oh, plain dog fight. Yeah.
The dog fight.
Yeah.
And the American plane got shot. And an American pilot came out of the plane, and he came out with parachute. My grandmother said to one of the guys, "Go meet that man and bring him back here with us." Well, we knew it was going to be far. Man didn't show up until late, and he said that the man was dead. And we knew he didn't die landing. He was killed.
Yes.
He was killed, and not by the Japanese.
Oh, not by the Japanese. By the Makapili.
No, there was no Makapili there.
Oh, there was no
That
Makapili.
was Tarok's territory.
Oh. You mean he was killed by guerrillas?
We think.
Okay.
Nobody knew. And nobody said a word. So we end up at the Rustias country house. Big place.
In Pampanga. Okay.
No, it was really out in the rice fields, and I couldn't tell if that was still Bulacan or Pampanga. I think it was Bulacan still. And so when we got there, there were an old family who was there, and they made lugaw, vats of lugaw. And we all had 1 cup of lugaw each, and everyone just fell, slept like sardines. Then I realized after putting everybody to sleep, I was busybody, trying to take care of everyone. Then I had no place to sleep. And some of these men were already sleeping on top of sacks of rice. So I ended up sleeping on a stair. That was my bed for the night. In the morning, we had more lugaw and started again on a walk. Another walk going from the Roostjes country house to where the Thompsons had their land, near the foothill of Mount Arayat. So that was another day travel. And when we got there, I mean, there were less people because by that time some people stayed at the Roostjes and another group, I think, went to another section of their land. But we went with this group and we were going to look for WWII. And they knew where it was, so we went to WWII, and there were 2 nipa huts, and it was they were homes of kasama tenants, and one family emptied one house, and they lived together in the other house, and they gave us one house. And that one house was probably 1 room, 2 rooms were probably as big as this, not even. And so we all slept like sardines again. But thank goodness the floors were all bamboo slats, so you could see down below, and the air was coming. And we were right beside an irrigation ditch. So in the morning, we could get fish from the irrigation ditch. It was beautiful, beautiful country. Oh, the smell of the rice just coming up. And not ready yet for harvest. Everything was beautiful and green.
And then how long did you stay there?
Well, we stayed there until the Americans arrived. But while we were there, don't include this in the story, but one day I was so hungry. I could smell that somebody was roasting meat. I couldn't even find where it was coming from. So I walked and walked and walked, and found another cluster of nipa houses. I think there were 3. And I went near the door, and this woman came out, and she said, "Oh, in Papango." And by that time, I was getting used to different dialects. You know, I was very fast picking up. And she said, "Come in, come in." He said, "You want one? You want one?" And they were roasting field rats. And that was apparently a delicacy there. I didn't know. I wasn't turned off to it. But you know what came to my mind? If I eat anything, I'd be taking away from these people. It didn't even occur to me that that was a rat that I would be eating. You know, and I knew they would not cook anything. It was so fabulous. I mean, you could tell that that they took, that there was something special in it. So I thanked them and left. But that was was one curious thing.
Mm-hmm. And then when did you know that the Americans?
Oh, well, not yet. First of all, we had to meet Taruk.
Oh, Taruk.
Oh, yeah, this was Taruk's territory.
Mm-hmm.
My uncle's territory was Taruk's territory.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one day, I was watching the kids from the window of the hut, and Elmer, my youngest brother, who was blonde, and my cousin Early, they were about the same age. They were playing near the Patubig, the irrigation ditch. And here comes 3 men and their horses.
Mm-hmm.
And one was pulling an American flag on the ground. And they looked, they had guns.
Mm-hmm.
And one looked at the boys and said to the boys, one day you're going to have it'll be your turn.
Mm-hmm.
The boys were so scared, they barely knew what it meant. They were just so scared of these 3 masked men. They were masked.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
And they ran to the house, and I saw this all happening because I was babysitting at the window, and they were just there playing on the dirt there.
Mm-hmm.
And I ran down, and by the time I got down the bamboo stairs, they had fled away.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the boys were very scared.
Scared. Mm-hmm.
And I told my uncle right away, and Uncle went. He said, I'm going to the chief.
Mm-hmm.
So he went from our house. There was a rice paddy all the way. And way at the distance, there was a kind of a cluster of house, a nipa house, and maybe a little chapel. We couldn't see that far, but he knew that's where the chief was.
Mm-hmm.
So he went all the way there, and he made Taruk promise that we were not going to be harmed. And Taruk said to him that no, we were protected. The thing there was, were we going to be used as pawns? What was going to happen? And so he offered us protection. That night, some guys came with their guitars and started serenading us. So every night since, we had guys coming to serenade. And we'd offer them lugao. We'd have lugao. And we also harvested duck eggs, which was so precious, but only the sick kids could have that. We had an outhouse. We'd go way out to the field to go to the outhouse, which was several, bamboo tall things. But it was done so that the smells would not be around there.
The main.
Talk about anthropology. How the people out in the provinces used to make their outhouses safe, no smells, depending on where the wind blew. You climbed up different stairs to go up there, depending on how the wind blew. At least it was in that place. But anyway, apparently in Mexico, in some places that they're still doing that.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, so one day, I had a sore ear from wearing bakyat, and I gashed it, and it was getting really bad, really bad. And so I was beginning to have
Fevers.
No, I didn't have a fever, but I was beginning to think of Manila. Manila, by the time we left, the streets were full of people carrying caskets back and forth. I mean, everyone was starting. The zonas were starting. It was quiet, deathly feeling. And the poor people, you know, full of sores. And I thought, well, I'm one of them now, you know. And we have nothing. We're just now waiting. Waiting for death, or waiting to be rescued. What was it? But hope was beginning to I was beginning to think of old prayers that my witch aunties from Tanawan taught me how to do. You know, they were kind of almost like live hallucinations, but they weren't really hallucinations. And then one morning, Albert used to love to look for gorillas because he thought he would join them. Oh, one aside, we bathed in the Pampanga River, which wasn't far. That river was so beautiful and clear. You could see all the way from one end to the other, you know, just beautiful water. So we'd go there and swim there and bathe there. And one day we knew we were being watched by men. And one woman came to us and whispered and said, better get out of here because there's another group of men on the other side. And it turns out later that was an American guerrilla was on the other side of the river.
Ramsey?
Ramsey. I think Ramsey was on the other side.
Because he was in that area, yeah.
He was on that other side, and we were on this side with the Taruk.
Oh, they hated each other.
They hated each other.
Oh, God.
And so this woman whispered to us, get out, because there's another group there. So we began to feel like, you know, we didn't.
You were in between the firing line.
We were in between, and were we going to be pawns?
Yes.
I mean, you know. So anyway, one day Albert came running towards the hut. You know, I was really tired, just wondering what was going to happen to us. And Albert came and he said, the Americans are here, the Americans are here. And I said, you're kidding. The Americans are here, come on. And I told Grandma, and Grandma came, snatched her purse, and she and I held hands and we ran after Albert. And we met this woman, and she gave this woman money, and she said, take this back to the hut, tell them to look for a caritela or a carabao, tell them to go back to Baliwag. So we left them.
Oh.
We left them there. We ran and got to the main road. It was a long run, a long travel. And we'd ask people along the way, and they would say, oh yeah, there's something going on there. And so we went and got to the main road finally. And there they were coming straight at us, soldiers, one after another, American soldiers in khakis, different color, different helmets, and different guns and boots, and I couldn't believe it. the first thing that came to me was, I smell khaki. That strong smell of different, after you've been in pure rice fields, you can smell. And there was the khaki smell. And so there was Grandma and I were standing there, and a soldier came by and saw me and said to me, "What are you doing here?" You know, I hadn't put on my mask or anything like that. What are you doing here? And I said, "I belong here." And I said, "This is my grandma." And he bowed to her and went on, because they were on their way to Manila. So Grandma and I followed them, and Albert appeared from there and warned me. There was some, "Don't step on that." Showed me a dead body. I think it was a dead Japanese soldier. And there was, across the street, there was a truck, an American truck. And they were picking up, I think, dead. I mean, I could see them. Not many, but some. And so we went just ahead, and I thought, "Oh my God, this is war. You know, we could be killed here." But we followed with them.
You walked?
We walked all the way with them, all the way back to Baliwag.
Oh, all the way back to Baliwag?
All the way back to Baliwag.
So you met the family later in Baliwag? The rest of them followed?
No, we haven't. We didn't see them again for weeks after.
For weeks?
Yeah, because Grandma and I went back to Baliwag. We got there in the evening, early evening. All of Baliwag was quiet. Nothing was happening in Baliwag. And so we went straight to our house. I opened the gate, and when I was at the gate, this American captain came to me at the gate while soldiers were walking. They were going to go to Manila. And he came to me, and he gave me a small can of ham. And he said, "Cook this, I'll be back tonight." So I was really surprised. I mean, all of a sudden I was hearing English. I hadn't heard English in 4 years. And everything was kind of a shock inside. And so by that time, a former cook of somebody in the area came to us. And I said, "What are you doing here? I thought everyone was gone." And he said he thought he was the only one left in the whole town.
So people left Baliwag then?
Oh yeah.
Because of the zonification?
Because of the fire. You know, the Japanese were evacuating. They were leaving Manila. They were going to go up to Baguio.
To Baguio?
Yes.
So they were burning the towns?
Burning the towns as they went along.
Wow.
If they had a chance.
Yes.
They didn't do it to every town. But they did it to a lot of towns.
Wow.
But they started at a certain point in Bulacan, then stopped. Baliwag, that front part of Baliwag was saved. They were apparently rushing there to meet with another troop coming from elsewhere to go to Baguio.
To Baguio.
Yes, and the Americans were coming this way. And this is where we were, in this area. But so this man saw what was happening. He said, I'll cook it. He said, and she said, "I'll go get vegetables." So he went around getting vegetables. I was practically dead from walking, and because that was, you know, far from Pampanga to Bulacan.
In your bakya.
And well, a lot of times.
Or chinelas.
I had no
shoes.
No shoes at all. my feet were, my wound was really sore. And so he picked some vegetables wherever he could find it. And he picked some snails. We had river snails, and they were good. I mean, that was always a kind of a delicacy there. So he got the snails and he cooked the ham. He got the fire. We had palayokes in the back of the house because that was an antique house. The kitchen was outside. The palayokes were all lined up in the azotea, and the water, you know, the tapayans were there, like that thing out there I have. And they, so he cooked this meal.
So the captain came back?
The captain came back and brought somebody with him. And he asked me who we were. I said we were from Manila, and then I couldn't ask him questions. He wasn't asking us questions. We were eating mainly in silence because I think we were
hungry,
in a state of shock. And right after eating, they slept in the beautiful furniture that was in the living room. And then they were going to fall asleep. And then one of them woke up and they said thank you and left with the troops. 4 o'clock in that morning, Grandma and I said we were going back to Manila. So we got up, and the troops were still going. Thousands of.
So you walked to Manila?
So we walked. We started our walk. And maybe only half an hour after we started our walk, a weapons carrier came by. We were the only civilians. We were the only people on that road aside from the soldiers. And so I got there, this weapons carrier stopped, and this colonel inside ordered, have them come in. And the officer got down and the colonel asked, where are you going? I said, we're going to Manila, to Sampaloc, near Santo Tomas. He said, get in, we're going there. And so they picked us up, the two of us. And so I began to wonder, who were these guys, you know? This was big deal. I mean, I could tell, the colonel and all these, you know, his bodyguards and whatnot. And the two of us were there. And we rode with them, and all that time, all the way to Manila, the soldiers never stopped.
Wow.
And so we get to Balintawak, and he said, we're going to have to let you off here. He said, but be careful. It looks like MacArthur is here. And so I thought, oh my God, won't it be nice? He's here. But he said, get out of the way. You know, this is dangerous. And so they showed us, go this way, go that way. And I said, okay, from there I know my way. Because I had scouted that whole area during the war. I knew that whole area. And so I said goodbye. And the road was cleared. There were jeeps and trucks, searchlights, and I knew somebody important was going to be there. And so we they told us where the artillery guns were to avoid those areas. So I knew how to get out of there, and my grandmother was very good at this too. She was incredible. So we knew where to hide, what streets to take back to our house. So we get back to our house.
The one in near Santo Tomas.
Yes, the dormitory.
The dormitory. Yes.
We get into the dorm, and the couple who were taking care of the house wasn't there. They left a note and said that they had joined their family. So they just left the house empty. And we got in, and pretty soon I heard some fire guns
In Santo Tomas.
from the Santo Tomas, and I saw the gate opened and Jeep going. This was the back door, not the front gate.
Right.
We were in the back, and a Jeep going in, and then it closed again. And pretty soon Albert arrived, and he said, I was in Santo Tomas. He said, I just went in. I was looking for Papa. And he said, I couldn't find him. He said, it's nobody knows where anyone is, but we think he got shot at the gym or.
So what happened?
So he said, they're looking, everyone's looking around. And so he came back with a little package, a little surprise. And he opened it, and it was a piece of white bread. And so we looked at it, white bread. I hadn't seen white bread in 4 years.
So what happened to your grandfather?
Well, wait a minute. I'll have to tell you how we found him. So my grandmother, it was a blessing to have this white bread. I mean, it meant mana is coming back. So she cut it in 4, and she gave me 1 piece. She gave Albert 2 pieces, and she had the other one. We all had our Thanksgiving. That was our Thanksgiving. I mean, I don't know if it was for me. That was the best Thanksgiving ever. Then Albert went away again. He was going to look for Grandpa. So following morning, we got up again. We were always getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning. We were able to get into the gate, the back gate. And I started looking around. I mean, people were milling around, soldiers and civilians, and and then Red Cross stables. And so I saw, and they said Grandpa was taken to a field hospital. He had he was hit by a shrapnel, and he had a heart attack or something. But he was taken to a field hospital. So I knew, and they told me where it was, and I knew where the location was. It was a very ritzy area in Santa Mesa, where there were huge estates with big houses. And so Grandma and I decided we'll walk over there. And Albert found us and gave us a couple of potatoes. They gave him some food, and they gave us potatoes to eat. And that was it. We had, and I had a bottle of water. And so we decided to
walk to Santa Mesa.
To walk to Santa Mesa, to look for the field hospital. And we decided to avoid streets and go through fields and just occasional sniper fire, where we'd get down on the ground and wait for everything to get quiet again. Then we finally found the field station. And we walked in there. They saw us. They saw me limping, and they took me right away and washed my sore and took me to Grandpa. And the first thing that came out of Grandpa was, you know, we were hugging and kissing, and he said, "Did you see Courtney? He was just here." Courtney Whitney, General MacArthur's aide. I mean, he was the one in charge of guerrilla affairs in Australia. Anyway, Courtney Whitney was a partner of my grandfather.
Oh.
He was a well-known lawyer in Manila before the war, and then came to the States, and he was in the States when the war broke out. MacArthur called him back to Australia and made him head of guerrilla affairs. Anyway, Courtney Whitney became, from that point on, became MacArthur's best friend. And they worked together all the way to Japan, all the way after the bombing, all the way trials.
Yeah.
And Courtney,
he was in charge of intelligence, G2.
and he wrote a book about this thick after called MacArthur's Rendezvous with History. If you want data of all of MacArthur's dealings, it's in that book. You won't find it anywhere else. And anyway, how he prepared all the way to the Korean War. Anyway,
your grandfather.
Grandpa said, "Courtney was here, you missed him." And when he said that, I thought, "Oh my God, they're back. They're really back." I mean, the names, everything's becoming alive again. I felt like we had been in a tunnel, in a dark, dark place for so long. So the nurses there, you know, fed us and took care of my foot and gave me medicine to take, and then took us home in a jeep. And then the following morning, Grandpa said, "Go back home."
To the old house?
To Santa Ana. And they might take me. He said, "I'll probably be here, but they might fly me to the States. Who knows what's going to happen?"
Oh.
And so Grandma and I went back. I mean, we were in Asturias again at the dormitory. And the following morning, we got up again very early and walked to Malacanang Palace, which is not far from where we were. And we were going to cross there. Well, all the bridges were bombed. Everything was bombed. And across the bridge was fire. Walls of fire. And that's where we were going.
Oh.
The Americans were already building a pontoon bridge to get across.
Right.
So I said, "We're not going to be ready. Don't go back there." Just so we went back in the afternoon, or it was kind of mid-afternoon. They had finished, and before you knew it, the refugees
were leaving
from burning Manila. That was what's his name, Rampage was talking about. That was the beginning of that war. Almost an isolated piece of history. But they were coming here, and Grandma and I were the two crazy people who were going the other way.
You were going
the other way. So we end up at the end of this bridge, and we wind our way through, because we knew that if we went this way, we'd be in trouble. So we end up near the Paco Cemetery. And there, we couldn't tell direction anymore because everything was on fire. Firewall. Burning bodies. I mean, you could smell dead,
Yeah, flesh.
burning bodies. And there were soldiers still with, looking for snipers. And one soldier got a hold of us and took me to a table with another officer. He said, "What's your name? Give me your names. What are you doing here?" I said, "We're going back to Santa Ana." And he said, "Okay, here." He gave me, one soldier gave me a couple of dollars, or $1, and another one gave me chocolate and or chiclet. And then told us to go one way, and so we knew our way there, going on the way to Pandacan, where there was more fire going on. And I said, well, that's going to Pandacan. Maybe our factories were already burning in Paco. And so we skirted away and got to an estero, and we knew the estero, and there was a man there with a bamboo, made himself a bamboo crossing thing, and he asked a lot of money to take people across. But the refugees were here, all bleeding, and he said to us, "Karina just got past my," and he talked to us as though we knew Karina. Well, as a little girl, I kind of knew names, but I didn't know who Karina. But anyway, Karina just passed by. Karina lost all his
Yes,
family.
his family. Wow.
But he said he just passed by. So we went across, and as soon as we got across, there was still fires coming from this area of Singalong and in this area. So we went kind of a small strip of Paco, going back to the clam fields where there was no fire. That was all watery area. But this was fire here also. The Paco station was
Burning.
And so we went across, and as soon as we got near the Paco church, there were people already beginning to trade food. Some people have made lugao or just to feed people who were, and they were charging money, but there was food finally. Very little though, very, very little. And they weren't selling in big quantities because they knew other people had to eat. I mean, they had to ration the food. Even if they were selling and making money on it, they weren't. They were out to help people coming in from the burning area of Malate and down to Dart Paco. Dart Paco was a wall of flames. And so we went down Iran, and we had to go in the watery sections, and front of Concordia College looked like it was burning. And so we had to go in and out of different sections, until we got back to Manila. And when we got back to the area where Anteheran seemed to be where the fighting stopped, and then there was the Jesuit house there, the La Iglesiana, and then we had new neighbors who bought an old Chinese house near the La Iglesiana, and they seemed to open it up, and they were feeding some people there. We were just so tired. We just went all the way to the end, and near the church, and when we got to the corner near the church going to Old Panaderos, a man came by, and he knew who we were. I didn't know who he was, but he said they just burned your house.
Oh. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So they apparently, the Japanese used it as a
headquarters.
As headquarters.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they gasoline.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the house burned.
Was there anyone burned inside?
No.
Mm-hmm.
No. That was all. They. It was their headquarters.
Mm-hmm.
So when they left, nobody knows where they went.
Mm-hmm.
And that was another area where the Americans were going to come from this area to get these people, these Japanese soldiers who were left in that area. So we thought, oh my God, another battle. Again, in our house. Kind of a starting point. But the man who was with us said, we don't think there's any more Japanese here. So we went to the 3 houses across the street, the one where Iraqi Badai stayed. They were all empty. These all belonged to us. So we got into the middle house. I mean, everything was vacated. And it was still nice to get home. And I just touched the wood and the tiles. And my story ends
with that.
Just getting on the floor.
Right.
And we had no water. We had nothing. So my book ends there. But then Grandma and I had nothing.
And then when did your grandfather rejoin you?
He rejoined us after he got well at the field station. A weapons carrier brought him to our house.
Okay.
And by that time, neighbors and friends where we had sent furniture and all to be stored, people started coming, bringing back our things on their own.
Oh, they did.
Yes. It was amazing how at a time like that, people just really give to really help each other.
And then the rest of your family.
And then the rest of my family also arrived.
Right.
They, from the fields, they were able to get a carabao with a wagon. And then from there, they went on the carabao thing to Baliwag. And then from Baliwag, they packed up their the stuff that they had and went. I think they said they were able to find a kind of a charcoal-fed truck still.
Is that the poppy? Poppy? Is that how you called it? Poppy?
I don't remember what we called it.
Put. Okay, put.
Trucks. Because that's how it sounded. The coconut would keep bursting. And so they were able to go back to Sampaloc, and from Sampaloc they were able to hire I think I remember an old truck that appeared with some of the furniture, and my family was back. In the meantime, my grandmother and I were looking for a way to get a kitchen going, and get water, and we were so high up in the grounds there, we couldn't dig any water. And oh God, she and I kept digging for water. And then we hired a couple of men who dug, and the water we got was so
dirty,
muddy. you know, we couldn't really use it except for the plants. And but by that time, the American Army had water tanks near the market, and you went and get your water,
lined up,
drinking water. And then there was another truck that came in that was that was part of the PICAO. The PICAO was a Philippine kind of emergency thing that came out, and so they also had water, but they told people not to use it for drinking. It could be used for cooking, but definitely not for straight drinking. For straight drinking, you had to go to another place. And so that was the beginning. We began to, little by little, things were getting pulled together. And then Grandpa was told he had to go for an operation here at what's that, Fort Miley.
Oh, okay.
So they took him here.
So your grandmother was left behind?
Yeah, we were all together. My mother was there. We all lived in this rental house that we had. And at that point, an American cavalry, no, not cavalry, but an American engineering division asked us if they could rent the whole hectare where all these were burned and the house burned. So we said yes, and they set up tents. So the engineering division stayed there for they did a lot of cleanup work. So they were there maybe for 2 months. And they'd bring us food, and they'd bring, you know, it wasn't, but they'd have movies every night in the old garden, and occasionally they'd invite us. And we'd be able to sit on benches in front of the big screen from Hollywood. All of a sudden, Lana Turner and all these new people we've never heard of before, new songs. And these GIs learned that I knew how to play the piano, and some people brought back our piano. They kept for us, and I had a baby grand, and so they brought the piano back, so I started learning.
Woogie woogie.
And they would bring pieces, you know. Until now, I have it in the garage. About that high of sheet music from the Second World War. But that was the beginning, and then the trials.
Oh, you were there?
No.
So did your grandfather testify?
No, he didn't testify. My grandfather wasn't there, but they. A lot of questions were asked because of the war reparations.
Right.
So there were lots of inquiries in different places. The American consulate office, you know, we had to line up and tell our stories and what we lost.
Oh, that's how it happened.
Lots. So a lot of history was being said, and towards 1947, 48, the who was it? I can't remember who it was. A former ambassador who had gone there to see the place. Said there was so much material that was left there that they needed a library, so they instituted a library called the Jefferson Library.
Oh, okay.
In the American embassy.
Oh.
And And then they were afraid of water coming in, spilling in from Manila Bay, and also so they were having to face a lot of how to protect papers. And so I think it got moved from the Jefferson, from the library to a house somewhere in Parañaque, as I remember, where they had to preserve, where the people who were involved and put up the money for it decided to preserve all that stuff. And that stuff was eventually what went to Ateneo for the American Historical Society.
Okay. Oh.
And my grandfather was interviewed there a lot. There's a lot of material on American business, American economy, and it's used a lot by people who were. When I went there for a presentation that they gave about him, there was a woman from Hong Kong doing her research on how my grandfather's economic theory of how to live during a depression. Because my grandfather did teach them. My grandfather came here before the depression and saw how bad it was. And when he got there, he told several other people what was going to happen. And 2 or 3 of those people followed him, and the 4 of them did not fall into depression. My grandfather started this idea of you don't use credit. The way to get out of it is not to use any credit. You use all cash, and you discount. That brings you back to basics. And it's better than standing in line waiting for a handout. And that was very successful. And he was asked to talk in many places. And he's written about in economic development in the Philippines.
Wow.
So